She stepped into the shooting range with quiet confidence, but the room greeted her with nothing but dismissive glances and stifled smirks. A black woman? Here? Among rows of seasoned, mostly white marksmen, all snug in their expensive gear, her presence was seen as nothing more than an amusing interruption. No one offered her guidance. No one even bothered to ask if she needed help. The instructor skipped over her twice. The regulars whispered under their breath, their chuckles thick with doubt and condescension. She wasn't clad in tactical vests. She didn't carry an arsenal of polished weapons. All she held was an old, slightly worn pistol, her father's, and a silent resolve that had been forged in years of being underestimated. What they didn't know was that every slight, every dismissive glare, every barrier put before her had trained her hands steadier than any competition ever could. And when she finally stepped onto the firing line, ignored, overlooked, doubted, her very first shot echoed louder than the gun itself. It didn't just hit the bullseye, it shattered the state champion's long-standing record into splinters. The whispers turned to stunned silence. The smirks melted into disbelief. And as she calmly laid her pistol down, all eyes that once refused to see her couldn't look away now. This is the story of Maya Clarkson, the woman who silenced an entire room, not with words, but with precision that no prejudice could predict. Stay with us, because what happened after that first shot changed far more than just numbers on a board. Maya Clarkson was no stranger to being overlooked. Born and raised in the heart of Atlanta, in a neighborhood where opportunities were rationed and biases ran deep, she had learned early that she would have to claim her space in a world hesitant to offer her one. Her father, Samuel Clarkson, a stern yet deeply loving man, had long recognized the silent battles his daughter would face. From an early age, he had instilled in her lessons that stretched far beyond school books. Lessons about composure, discipline, and self-worth. And for him, the most unlikely of tools became the foundation for these teachings: marksmanship. Samuel had been a decorated marksman during his years in the military, but upon returning home, he quickly learned that accolades did little to dismantle the walls of racial prejudice. Rejected from local shooting clubs and treated as an outsider in competitions he had once dominated, he never spoke of bitterness. Instead, he quietly set up makeshift targets in their backyard, inviting Maya to learn not just the art of shooting, but the art of focus and persistence. By the age of 10, Maya's hands were steadier than most adults. Her father's teachings were clear. The pistol was not just a weapon, it was a tool to sharpen her mind, to channel her frustrations, and to remind her that even in a world that wanted her unseen, she could leave an undeniable mark. They spent countless afternoons together, Maya listening intently as Samuel blended lessons about wind speed and breathing control with wisdom about life. Precision, baby girl, is about knowing when to act, not just how, he would say, and patience is your greatest ally, both on the range and in this world. Despite the sanctuary those backyard sessions provided, the world outside was not as forgiving. In school, Maya was often the only black girl in her advanced classes. Teachers, doubting her capabilities, would lower their expectations before she even spoke. Classmates would scoff at her ambitions, reducing her intellect to an anomaly, an exception to their unspoken rule. Yet every evening, as she returned home and took her place at the practice line, those weights would lift, if only for a while. Through her teenage years, Maya became known within her small circle as unshakable. When others bent under pressure, she remained upright, her calm demeanor puzzling even the most persistent provocateurs. Few knew the secret behind her composure. Countless hours spent focusing on tiny bullseyes, controlling her breath, steadying her heartbeat. Shooting for Maya was more than sport, it was meditation. Tragedy, however, came sooner than she expected. At the age of 19, her father passed away suddenly, leaving behind a legacy that weighed heavy on her young shoulders. His funeral was filled with former soldiers who spoke of his unmatched skill and unbreakable spirit. Yet as the days went by, Maya felt the sting of reality settling back in. Without her father's protective guidance, she stood alone against a world still slow to accept her place. For several years, she distanced herself from the shooting range. The pistol, once a symbol of connection and strength, became too painful a reminder of her loss. She pursued higher education, built a career in engineering, and carved a respectable path for herself. But the itch never fully left. Each time life dealt her a subtle injustice, a promotion denied without cause, an assumption made about her capabilities, a meeting where her voice was drowned out. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Patience is your greatest ally, but precision is how you make them notice. When Maya turned 32, a flyer caught her eye. A local state-level shooting competition was being hosted just miles from her workplace. The poster displayed faces she recognized from years past. Champions, all white. Many who had never once acknowledged her father's talent. A quiet fire stirred in her chest. She wasn't here to reclaim trophies for nostalgia's sake. She was here to remind herself, and perhaps them, that skill and excellence knew no color. With measured determination, she dusted off her father's old pistol, the same one she had last held as a teenager. The grip felt familiar, almost like shaking hands with a long-lost friend. And though her hands trembled slightly, it wasn't from fear, it was anticipation. Her decision to enter that shooting range wasn't born out of revenge. It was born out of something deeper, more profound. A promise. A promise to her father and to herself that she would never again dim her light to make others comfortable. That her silence would end, not with shouts, but with a shot so precise that no one could deny it. And with that, Maya Clarkson stepped onto the path that would soon echo far beyond the walls of that range. The shooting range that Maya walked into was a pristine, polished establishment, revered in state circles as the epicenter of elite marksmanship. From the moment she stepped through the heavy glass doors, the atmosphere wrapped around her. Crisp, cold, and heavy with an unspoken exclusivity. The walls were adorned with photographs of past champions, every frame a testament to victories accumulated over decades. Yet one thing was immediately clear. There wasn't a single face that resembled hers. As Maya approached the reception desk to register for the competition, the attendant's glance barely flickered in her direction. His voice remained flat, transactional, but under the surface a thin layer of skepticism clung to every word. His eyes slid down to the pistol case in her hand. Not a sleek, modern model, but an aged weapon whose worn leather told stories far deeper than they cared to hear. Without asking further questions, he slid the registration form toward her and called the next person forward, his attention already drifting away. In the waiting area, competitors milled about in tight clusters. Their conversations flowed with technical jargon and easy camaraderie. But as Maya found an empty chair, a few sets of eyes lingered on her. They didn't need to say anything aloud. Their glances carried centuries of assumptions. A black woman, alone, with no entourage, no shiny gear, no visible affiliations. She was, in their minds, already out of her league. No one approached her. No one exchanged the customary polite nods that participants often share. When the instructor began the mandatory safety briefing, his gaze swept over the room and skipped past her twice. He explained procedures to the group in great detail, but when his eyes finally landed on Maya, his tone shifted subtly, tinged with an unspoken question. Are you sure you know what you're doing here? He didn't voice it, but the tilt of his head and the forced smile betrayed the doubt lodged firmly behind his professionalism. Maya sat still, her expression calm. She had long learned the art of absorbing dismissal without letting it fracture her resolve. Her father had warned her about moments like this. "You'll walk into rooms where people think they've already measured you," he had once said. "Let them measure, and then make sure you're the one holding the ruler when it counts." The shooting lanes were wide and pristine, each station lined with cutting-edge equipment and digital scoring boards. Competitors unpacked sleek firearms from velvet-lined cases, adjusting scopes with confident precision. Conversations floated around her, small jokes, shared strategies, casual remarks about serious contenders. Maya's name never passed their lips. As she set her father's pistol on the counter, a man 2 lanes over chuckled quietly. He nudged his partner, gesturing subtly in her direction. Words didn't reach her ears, but experience had sharpened her ability to read body language as clearly as text. They were amused. Amused that she had shown up. Amused that she thought she belonged here. When the practice rounds began, the instructor offered additional guidance to several participants. As he neared Maya, he hesitated, then veered off toward another group, bypassing her entirely. It was as if her existence was something to be politely ignored, a fleeting anomaly not worth addressing directly. Yet Maya's face remained unchanged. Her father's voice echoed within, "Don't feed them with frustration. Starve them with excellence." Minutes stretched into an hour as participants fired their test shots. Digital targets lit up with data, accuracy percentages, point spreads, distance corrections. Numbers flickered, names shuffled on the leaderboards. Maya sat quietly, not touching her weapon yet. No one noticed. No one cared. And in that invisibility, she found an unexpected clarity. If they weren't watching her now, they wouldn't anticipate what was coming. As she finally stood to approach her lane, she felt a ripple of curiosity flicker around her. A few heads turned, not out of interest, but out of mild surprise that she was still here, still participating. From behind her, one voice muttered, "Let's see how long she lasts." The words were soft, but they pressed against her spine with familiar weight. Still, her expression never faltered. Her hands moved with practiced ease as she assembled her gear. The aged pistol gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights, its weight balanced perfectly in her grasp. Years of muscle memory awakened within her bones. The dismissive stares, the sidelong glances, the instructor's oversight. None of it mattered now. What mattered was the distance between her and the target, and the steady breath in her chest. As the official competition rounds were announced, competitors hustled to finalize their preparations. Maya's lane remained quiet, untouched by the social currents that buzzed around her. But within that bubble of solitude, her focus crystallized sharper than ever before. And though no one yet realized it, the woman they had dismissed was about to rewrite the very narrative that had tried to confine her. The final round bell echoed crisply through the range, silencing all murmurs as participants took their places. Targets, positioned 50 meters away, shimmered faintly under the bright overhead lights. Maya slid into position with the grace of someone who belonged there, though no one watching would have said it aloud. Around her, competitors exhaled sharply, adjusted their stances, and fired off rapid shots with confidence born of routine. But Maya did not rush. She did not fidget with her stance. She closed her eyes briefly, letting her breath settle. Her father's lessons surged forward again. Steady, deliberate, patient. This wasn't just about accuracy. It was about composure in a world that wanted her rattled. When she opened her eyes, her focus narrowed sharply, blocking out everything but the small red circle in the center of her target. She raised her pistol, the worn, unglamorous weapon that had been her father's pride, and took her shot. One crack split the air, clear, clean, singular. In the split second after the bullet flew, silence thickened unnaturally across the shooting range. The sharp pop of Maya's shot seemed to reverberate longer than anyone else's. Heads turned instinctively toward her lane. Some did so out of reflex, others out of disbelief that she'd finally fired at all. Then the digital scoreboard flickered. For a heartbeat, number scrambled and then froze. 50 meters. Bullseye. 98.7% precision score. Distance adjustment, none. Deviation, 0. A gasp, sharp and involuntary, escaped from someone at the back. Another man cursed under his breath. Eyes darted to the leaderboard screen, which refreshed again to reflect a simple, undeniable fact. New record holder, Maya Ellison. The silence fractured all at once. Conversations burst like cracks in glass. People who had ignored her minutes before were now openly staring. Competitors abandoned their lanes momentarily to verify the screen, their faces tight with confusion and dawning recognition. The instructor, who had passed over her during briefings, approached with quick, clipped footsteps. His expression hovered between disbelief and professional obligation. No one said anything directly to Maya yet, but their body language spoke volumes. Eyebrows arched, jaws tightened, feet shifted uncomfortably. The champion, whose record had just been shattered, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Connor Hayes, whose photo dominated the range's trophy wall, stood frozen a few lanes down. His lips parted slightly, eyes locked on Maya's score, as if willing the numbers to shift back. But they didn't. Maya lowered her pistol calmly. No smile played on her lips. No triumphant grin cracked through her composure. She had not come here to gloat. She had come to break the silence that had encased her since she walked through the door. And with one perfect shot, she had done exactly that. Around her, the quiet awe thickened. For the first time that day, every gaze that fell upon her carried something new. No longer dismissal, no longer quiet mockery. It was uncertainty now, the uncomfortable shuffling of minds recalibrating their expectations. Maya quietly reset her stance, prepared for the next round. She knew this was only the beginning. As Maya's name settled at the top of the leaderboard, a quiet ripple of reckoning moved through the room. For the first time since she had entered the range, people began to acknowledge her presence in full, not as a curiosity, not as an anomaly, but as an undeniable force that had reshaped the contours of their confidence. The same competitors who had earlier avoided her gaze now found themselves gravitating toward her lane, curiosity tightening into cautious admiration, though some still wore masks of veiled resentment. Connor Hayes, the former record holder, finally stepped forward. His walk was steady, but his shoulders bore the unmistakable stiffness of bruised pride. As he approached Maya, the surrounding crowd parted slightly, creating an unintentional stage for the first direct interaction of the day. His eyes were sharp, calculating, searching her face not for malice but for understanding, for explanation. "You've got a hell of a shot," he finally said, his voice gruff but controlled. His gaze flicked briefly to the aged pistol in her hand. "Where'd you learn that?" Maya met his stare squarely, her expression still even. "From my father. He taught me everything I know." Her tone was calm, but it carried a quiet weight that discouraged frivolous questions. Connor nodded once, slowly, but the corner of his mouth twitched, a small tell that disbelief still simmered beneath the surface. Around them, hushed voices resumed, speculating aloud now, where before there had been only silent judgment. "Must have been a hell of a teacher," someone muttered nearby. Maya didn't turn to address the voice. Instead, she laid her pistol down on the counter gently and folded her arms. "He was," she replied simply. But her words, though soft, rippled outward with clarity, as if daring anyone else to undermine what had just happened. It didn't take long for whispers to shift tones. The skepticism, though still present in undercurrents, began to morph into something more complicated. Begrudging respect mingled with bruised egos. A few competitors offered stiff nods in her direction. The instructor, red-faced and flustered, approached at last to formally acknowledge her score. "Miss Ellison," he began, clearing his throat awkwardly. "That was outstanding. You've officially set a new range record." His words hung in the air, heavy with subtext. Maya offered a short nod in return, making no effort to soften the moment with pleasantries. She had no intention of making it easier for them to digest what had transpired. For years, she had walked into spaces like these, spaces where her presence had been reduced to a footnote, where her skin and gender had been silently weighed and dismissed before her abilities had even been glimpsed. And here on this sterile, polished range, the cycle had repeated itself until she had broken it with nothing but precision and poise. Now standing in the midst of those who had underestimated her, Maya allowed herself a small, private breath of vindication. Not because they now respected her, but because she had never needed their permission to excel in the first place. By the time Maya packed her gear and stepped out into the cool evening air, word of her record-breaking shot had already traveled beyond the walls of the range. In today's world, nothing stayed confined for long. A fellow competitor had filmed the scoreboard the moment her name appeared, and within hours, clips had begun to circulate online. Her phone buzzed silently in her pocket, a steady stream of notifications piling up from people she hadn't spoken to in years. But Maya's stride was steady as ever. She had not taken that shot for viral fame. No, her intention had always been simpler and deeper: to reclaim space in a world that constantly tried to shrink her. Yet as she walked across the parking lot, she heard hurried footsteps approaching behind her. Turning slowly, she found herself face to face once more with Connor Hayes. Gone was the tight jaw and guarded pride. His posture was different now, a man recalibrating not just his perception of her, but of his own understanding of skill and superiority. "Wait," he called, catching up, slightly breathless. He shifted uncomfortably under the weight of his next words. I, I've been coming to this range for over 15 years. No one's ever touched that record. Not even close." Maya didn't respond immediately, her eyes steady on him. Connor exhaled hard through his nose, as if wrestling with something far heavier than just a bruised ego. "Look, I think I need to say this. Earlier today, when you walked in, I didn't think you belonged here. That's on me." His voice cracked slightly. "It's not just because you're new. I let other things cloud how I saw you. And I was wrong." For the first time, Maya saw something genuine flicker across his features. Humility without the thin varnish of pity. She gave a small nod, her expression softening just slightly. "I didn't need an apology," she said quietly, "but I respect that you gave one." Connor gave a tight smile, half relief and half acknowledgement. "If you're open to it, I'd like to shoot with you sometime. Learn a thing or two." Maya considered for a long moment before a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Maybe," she replied, "but only if you're ready to miss a few more records." He chuckled under his breath, the tension between them easing naturally. And as they stood there, a former champion and the woman who had shattered unspoken ceilings, something important had already begun to shift. Not just between them, but within the quiet, unyielding culture that had for too long built invisible walls around who was allowed to be the best. Maya's phone vibrated again in her pocket, the buzz sharper this time. Tomorrow, she knew, journalists and shooting enthusiasts alike would come calling. Her inbox would be full of interview requests, partnerships, and commentary, some praising, some skeptical. But tonight, under the settling dusk, none of that mattered. What mattered was that a door had opened, and Maya Ellison had walked cleanly through it, leaving it wide for anyone else who had ever been told, "You don't belong here." Weeks passed, but the echo of Maya's shot never faded. Her name had become more than just a fixture on a shooting range leaderboard. It had transformed into a symbol whispered through online forums, sports columns, and community gatherings. For some, she was simply the woman who broke the record. But for many others, especially young Black women and girls who had long scanned spaces for reflections of themselves and found none, she had become something more, a possibility. Invitations poured in rapidly. Ranges across the country reached out asking her to speak at workshops, mentor rising shooters, and host training sessions. At first, Maya hesitated. She had always preferred quiet mastery over spotlight, substance over spectacle. But the letters and messages she began receiving chipped away at her reluctance, not from corporate sponsors, but from everyday people. A young Black girl named Tasha wrote, "I saw your video. My older brother told me girls don't belong in places like that, but you made me think maybe I do. Can you teach me how to shoot one day?" A retired Black woman, Florence, emailed her, "I never touched a firearm in my life because folks always said it wasn't for women like us. You made me wish I'd tried. You made me proud anyway." It was clear Maya's story had rippled outward in ways no single shot could measure. One bright Saturday morning, Maya stood in front of a small but eager group at her local range. Young women, older women, some experienced, many beginners, all gathered with cautious excitement. The walls that had once felt cold and exclusive now hummed with energy that Maya had once dreamed of, but had never seen realized. Connor Hayes stood in the back, smiling quietly, now her ally and occasional co-trainer. Maya's voice was calm as she began. "When I walked into a shooting range for the first time, I was told with stares and silences that I didn't belong. Not out loud, but clear enough to hear. I want you to know something right now. You belong wherever you decide you do. You don't have to wait for permission." Their eyes brightened. She handed pistols to trembling, excited hands and walked them through techniques her father had once lovingly passed down to her. Every precise instruction she gave felt like a bridge, one that stretched across generations of quiet exclusion and planted firm footings for those to come. By the end of the day, the sound of targets splitting cleanly echoed through the hall, but it was the sound of laughter and rising confidence that filled Maya's heart. As the sun dipped low and students began to trickle out, one young woman lingered. She approached Maya hesitantly and asked, "Do you think someday I could break your record?" Maya smiled wide, a spark dancing in her eyes. "I'm counting on it." And with that, Maya Ellison knew her victory wasn't just in the record she had set. It was in the doors she had left wide open for all those who had been waiting on the other side.